Hi everyone, welcome back. This is Collier Bristow's 2024 budget special.
Budget special.
With me, Aidan Grant and James Austin.
Hello.
Thank you for coming back. In the first part, we gave you our thoughts on the non-dom reforms that came out yesterday, as well as our more general comments on the budget as a whole.
We did, and that went on rather longer than perhaps we thought. So we've split this into two parts, and you're now listening to part two.
So coming up, hopefully we will have some thoughts for you on inheritance tax and wider changes to agriculture and business property relief, capital gains tax, and a few other bits here and there that came out of the budget as well. So join us as we do this second part.
Thank you. My instruction yesterday before listening to budget to our team that we were working with was not to be too down in the mouth about it, wasn't it? I wanted us to try and look for the positive. And that was because of a recent experience on a business trip abroad where I was frankly given a fairly rough going over by some of the bankers and trustees that I spoke to, who just were astonished that the UK government seemed to be so determined, as they saw it, to immiserate and impoverish the UK as a destination of choice. And I found myself being sort of strangely defensive of the country. But the best I could really offer was, well, we've been through worse before. This too shall pass. And in the meanwhile, we're still here and the UK is open for business. So well, I'm pleased in that context that we found somebody who can raise a glass of 1p a pint draft beer in their pub.
Although, can I take your comment there and shoehorn in the most awkward segue I possibly can? You said the UK is open for business. However, might not be quite so open for business owners as it was before the budget.
Let's move on to talk about inheritance tax more generally for UK people, in particular changes to business property relief and agricultural property relief.
I mean, it's worth saying that the fears that inheritance tax were going to be tinkered with more foundationally, fundamentally, didn't come to pass.
They didn't. IHT, structurally speaking, is largely the same as ever.
7-year gift regime, spousal transfers, these things have all been left untouched. The residence no rate ban, God, it wouldn't have fun to have got rid of the residence no rate ban. The no rate ban has been frozen again.
Yes, another opportunity to simplify an over-complex tax code.
I did look. If you take the point at which the nil rate ban was most recently frozen in 2007, I think it was, and you extrapolate for sort of inflation, take like, I don't know, the CPI or whatever these things, the nil rate ban would these days be worth almost as much as the nil rate ban and the residence nil rate ban together, in which case they could have just scrapped the residence nil rate ban and just given married couples that £1 million overall.
Well, they could, except they dragged into the inheritance tax net, relatively speaking, a larger number of taxpayers by freezing the no rate band at 325,000.
So speaking of all the other people they've dragged in, there is a big group of people that have now been dragged kicking and screaming into the inheritance tax net.
Yeah, and we know, don't we, that our clients hate inheritance tax almost more than any other tax. It evokes this sort of visceral reaction in a lot of people who pay it, which in some respects I struggle to understand. In some respects I'm quite sympathetic to it. And one of the complaints we typically hear is, oh, well, it's double taxing. I've already paid, income tax on it in my lifetime. Why should my estate pay 40% inheritance tax?
But you heard of VAT.
I mean, the reality is that all wealth is taxed numerous times as it works its way through the economy, and inheritance tax is no different. And also, if IHT and CGT were to be abolished, and the consequence was just to add extra pennies in the pound on income tax, for example, that just creates fiscal drag. So the economy and everyone in it is poorer as a result. So there is a place for capital taxation. It's a smallish but important and useful part of the UK's overall tax take.
And what's important is there's now a place for inheritance taxation on our farms.
Yeah.
Sorry. Only on something like 25% of farms. I think we're reassured that actually this won't impact. This almost no farms will pay this. We're told.
Well, let's look at what they're saying. So, agricultural relief and business relief have subject to what might be called a cap and collar. which to explain is you get £1 million essentially.
To date, you've got unlimited
Unlimited.
relief on both. As long as you had
Okay.
assets that applied, you could have 100% relief on an unlimited amount of business property and an agriculture property.
Exactly so. And now you get a maximum of £1 million on both together.
Yes, one aggregate allowance.
One aggregate allowance of all qualifying agricultural and or business property prorated by value as between your agricultural and your business property, and everything over that £1 million, which would otherwise qualify, still qualifies for relief at 50%. And I feel very deeply for farmers in particular. I think a lot of farmers will consider the budget changes to be a really grievous attack on their livelihoods. It comes, compounding recent issues over replacement of the EU's common agricultural policy payments, which frankly hasn't gone smoothly. The best marginal profitability of farming as an industry at all at the moment. DEFRA, we now learn, are going to be subject to an actually reduced real terms funding settlement in the next government round. So less money for farmers. And I mean, it's not exaggerating to say that there is really rock bottom low morale in the farming sector. I mean, farmers tragically are some of the most the most liable for suicides. It's dreadful. For farming and agriculture in the UK are in a bad position. It's really very wide ranging, and the government says that 75% of APR claims and a majority, which I take to mean a fractionally over 50% of BPR claims, will be unaffected by these changes because they're less than £1 million anyway. In a farm, I forget what the exact figure is, but at average farmland prices, which is give or take £10,000-12,000 an acre, I think at the moment, that's something like 60 acres of farmland. Anything over that is going to attract IHT. Well, the reality is that small farms are not profitable farms anyway. The tendency has been for larger farms to be necessary economically. And that just guarantees that more and more farms will be brought into the IHT net, and tax is going to have to be found on death. And I don't know how, in practice, people are going to do that without selling either farms as a whole, if they can, if anyone wants to buy them, or selling parts of farms. Thus reducing the area of land under agriculture.
And should we just quickly touch on one other aspect of business property relief, which is being tightened as well, which is everyone's favorite AIM market?
Yeah, this is interesting. As this is another one that was widely predicted.
Yeah.
So currently AIM shares get 100%.
So that's the alternative investment market, which also
the junior market of the London Stock Exchange.
Good, reliable, solid investments, but
growth businesses, hopefully.
Just that slightly risky bit, which wants to be encouraged, and therefore was treated as business property for the purposes of this inheritance tax relief.
Yeah, because the government historically has wanted to encourage investors to put their money into UK growth companies, and so those have come with 100% business property relief historically. Now that's being capped again, or rather the rate is being capped. The rate of relief is now 50%.
So the tax is 20%.
Yeah, effectively. On those BPR products. Now, why is that? Well, I think this is an area where reform was necessary, actually. What has been happening in recent years is that inventive asset managers have been putting together, parceled up products of AIM shares, normally sort of asset-backed, safe, stable AIM listed shares, which probably invest on the market for precisely this purpose. They parcel them up, tie them with a nice bow, and they sell them as a product to typically aging investors who want to keep their capital safe, but are quite attracted to 40% IHT relief. And this has become, frankly, a huge industry, and it was never really what business property relief was intended to do. And so it was ripe for reform. And it's no surprise that this change has been brought in. And I don't think, other than the inventive asset managers who put these packages together, it will be widely lamented in its passing.
And for all those inventive asset managers, again, that's James Austin of Collier, and I'm joking. One last quick thing on inheritance tax. Not quick because, frankly, it's not a huge area, but just because it's probably not much to say on, which is pensions. This unexpected sort of inclusion of what they're calling unused pensions within the scope of charge of inheritance tax, which is a massive change.
It's a massive change, and it's interesting, isn't it? We expected the possibility of tax and NIs on pension contributions,
yes,
for example. That was widely tried. Wouldn't have been at all a surprise. This, I think, in many ways, is a more wide-ranging, less predictable.
I guess from a public policy perspective, they want to encourage people to put money into their pensions because they want people less reliant on the state pension, and so they
want to tax them on the way out.
Yeah, they've kept in place, the idea of our pension being something that you use to look after yourself during your lifetime, and it's not something that you can assume you can give away to the next generation. So they want to encourage you to stock your pensions full of wealth to look after yourself. But if it's going to be to look after your family, they would argue then that's inheritance tax. That is quite a big change.
It is. It'd be interesting to see how that one plays out. I don't sense the degree of resistance to that change that there will be to APR and BPR.
No, although we'll have a lot more people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it will. Should we leave IHT there?
Let's hop over the road to capital gains tax.
Our other next favourite tax.
For which the news is not as bad as it could have been as you trailed right at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the reporting in the weeks before the budget was putting about the possibility that CGT might go all the way up to 39%, I think.
Yeah, I think the government could have got any win, provided it kept the rate under about 30%.
Yeah,
right after all the speculation.
And what they've done is they've increased the basic rate from 10 to 18 and the higher rate from 20 to 24, and they've left the residential property rate unchanged at 24. So given how things might have been, I think those are pretty modest changes. They've come in the category of tweaks, don't they, rather than a wholesale.
Those clients that completed planning with significant capital gains consequences before the budget will be relieved because they will have saved, maybe 4%. Those that didn't do any planning will be relieved because actually a 4% increase, 20% increase on 20%
is probably not worth it.
Yeah, something you can probably ride out.
Yeah, I agree. But the interesting thing on CGT is anti-forestalling.
Yes,
I think so. Anti-forestalling is when measures are brought in. The interesting thing about these CGT rates is they're effective immediately, effective as from yesterday.
Good luck, accountants.
So for only the second time that I can remember, the first I think being in 2010, there's going to be a mid-year CGT rate change. So accountants of HMRC are going to have to take notice of the effective date of a transaction.
Oh God, what's the maximum supplementary charge in Section 87 distribution going to be now? I can't do my math.
Oh God, I mean, it's horrible, isn't it?
I have to work it out.
I know. We'll ask a friendly accountant.
You'll have a decimal point.
If a friendly accountant could get in touch with Aidan.Grant and tell us. But so anti-forestalling, the measures apply immediately. Now, I've got to be in my bonnet about this, and it's one that I've raised with friends and acquaintances at HMRC for years, because I think it's really self-defeating and it's really stupid, frankly, to bring in anti-forestalling measures like this. But it seems to be an article of faith at the Treasury and the Revenue that essentially once a budget measure increasing a tax rate has been announced, the thinking seems to be that any planning to forestall to get in front of that change is tantamount to unacceptable tax avoidance.
Rather than looking at the increased revenue you get as a result.
This is precisely my point. So we have some clients, we've been very busy in our team over the last few weeks, triggering disposals for a number of our clients at a known tax rate of 20% in most cases. They're content to pay this tax. In triggering these disposals now and in paying tax at 20% to the Exchequer, they're bringing forward a disposal. They are voluntarily bringing it upon themselves to pay tax to the revenue. In making tax changes like this effective immediately, the government loses the opportunity to magnify that process. Had they brought these changes into effect on 6th of April 25, we would have spent the next 5 months happily triggering disposals, paying tax at 20%, or our clients paying tax on 20%. I'm not wealthy enough, sadly. I don't know about Grant Towers.
Oh, yeah, we've been absolutely hemorrhaging stock.
Well, exactly. And the Exchequer would have been the winner, because you would have brought forward large quantities of essentially discretionary tax. Now, I think with the higher rate at 24%, it's probably neither here nor there, frankly. But had the rate gone as high as the mid to high 30%, for example, a rate of that kind, an increase of that kind, would have meant that any discretionary disposals would have been pushed forward to the never, never, because nobody would voluntarily make a disposal of an asset and pay tax at that rate. So the other interesting CGT point is investors' relief and entrepreneurs' relief. So the rates for those are going up to 40% from 6th of April 25, and then to 18% from 6th of April 26.
These are some of these non-working people that the Labour Party was talking about.
Yeah, well, possibly, but since they can't define who is a working person, how does one to know?
Well, but in any event, these people certainly employ working people.
Well, as one imagines. But I mean, business asset disposal relief, and formerly known as entrepreneurs relief, has been pretty hollowed out, frankly, since the threshold was reduced to 1 million from 10 million. So
you're saying it's a pretty bad relief now.
Well, it's just pretty inconsequential to most of our clients.
It's the acronym, Jamie.
What?
It's the acronym. Business asset disposal. Bad.
Oh, you're not supposed to say that. Listeners, I apologise.
Sorry, just keep myself amused.
Oh dear, Agent. I don't know if that's me or you, but it's pretty terrible, I think.
I'll see the postcards.
Yeah, you can apologise later.
Anyway,
BADR, Entrepreneurs Relief, is frankly something of nothing. But Investors Relief, which is separate, which is where you don't work in the business, you're investing money in somebody else. Exactly. That has been 10 million until yesterday, and now that's been up to £1 million as well.
For poor dragons on Dragons Den.
There you go.
So the other group, can we do the other group?
Private equity.
Desperately bad for us people, as the private equity group as well.
Who I'm afraid society at a whole probably isn't going to sob big tears for. But yeah, their tax rates are going to go up. They're going to pay CGT at a new rate of 32% on carried interest from 6th of April 25. And from 6th of April 26, they're then going to be taxed at income tax rates, but with a multiplier currently set at 0.725%.
Which, staggeringly, if you take that as a rate of 45%, brings you almost exactly 32%. Which, again, in the grand scheme, they could have in tax to income tax rates. So we're not as bad as where we are, but we're worse than.
But also, what's interesting, the ground has changed, and changes to a multiplier are very different, very easy to do, aren't they?
Absolutely.
It's 0.725 next year. Who knows what it will be in following years? That depends on how much growth this budget for growth actually generates, I suspect. If not a lot, then it may be the Chancellor comes back with a begging bowl.
Should we do a little tiny bit on everyone's third favorite capital tax, which is SDLT.
If you're listening to this on or after the date of recording, the 31st of October,
it's
too late because you had until midnight last night.
So the government has made it further more punitive to own multiple properties. So currently under SDLT rules, SDLT for individuals is levied at a tranche rate where you pay a certain rate of SDLT per X pounds in each tranche, and so you end up with a blended rate overall. On top of that, there are currently 2 surcharges that our private client owners of property.
Yeah, so who pays the surcharges?
You have a surcharge for people that are non-resident purchasers, and you have a surcharge for people that own additional property when they buy the property in question.
And it's that category, isn't it? The last category.
Correct.
So here it's people who own a property and who buy a second or subsequent property. They pay a surcharge over and above their slab rate on SDLT.
That surcharge is being increased up to 5%. So
it's gone up 2%, doesn't it?
It's almost up. Yes, it's not. It's gone up. It's gone up to 5%, which, for those people that were in the process of purchasing houses now and have not yet exchanged, that is going to be an unwelcome cost for you.
But there are transitional rules, aren't they? So if people had exchanged, for example, but hadn't completed by midnight last night,
correct,
there are transitional rules that the old the rates will still apply.
Correct.
But only if the contract isn't changed.
Yes. So for most residential conveyances, that's probably not going to happen. If you are in a sort of a commercial transaction where you have a contract subject to options or other kind of variations, you might need to look quite carefully at the consequences of exercising these.
Yeah. So what is, pop quiz for you, what's the top rate of SDLT theoretically now?
Well, it'd be 12% for an individual, for a non-natural.
Go on, just what's the top rate? That's
presumably 19%.
Is 19%.
12% under the standard slab tranches. It's going to be 5% for an additional purchase, and it's going to be 2% for a non-resident. So yes, you're going to have
so it's 90% for the portion over 1.5 million.
Yeah. So 90% of the way in and 24% capital gains tax on the way out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steep, eh? But not so steep as an American disposing of property.
No, we'll actually win more than Americans. The Americans are 23.8.
Ah.
But to be fair, the Americans also have 3.
So the Boris Johnson trap of those Americans who sell their London properties without realising that they're American and having to pay tax.
This is very much a point of contention in the US-UK community. Assuming it's not their residence, because of course you'll get EPR on it as well. Yes, the UK rate of capital gains tax has now exceeded the US rate of capital gains tax. But to be fair, the Americans don't get a credit on the 3.8% in IIT or Obamacare levy, as it's known sometimes. So we were basically at parity with the American rate. But yes, we have just snuck past them. We've put a nose in front by, I think, 0.2%.
Race to the bottom. I'm done. I don't know about you.
What, with life generally, or with tax changes?
Certainly with the budget. I don't think
with no lunch. I mean, we hope this was helpful to anyone that's listening. If you're still listening to this, then we applaud you.
Thank you for bearing with us.
If anyone has any questions about things they've learned today or they want to get in contact with us, then please visit us at
www.collierbristow.com.
Thank you very much. I've been Aidan Grant.
And I'm Jamie Austin.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will speak to you again, hopefully at some point in the future.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.